Tom joining us?
I don't think he will.
Welcome to Senate Education, Thursday, April 20th. We had a witness who canceled for personal reasons, so we are going to start with VSAC's budget request. The Appropriations Committee has, I think Jane said you've been in.
Mhm.
Yep, and so this is an opportunity for us to hear your testimony as well, and you play your cards right, get a recommendation from Senate Ed.
We would obviously be delighted to have that recommendation.
No, we're really glad to see both of you. It's good to have you both here in person, Scott Giles and Marilyn Cargill. So I know you have a handout here for us, and we'll pass the floor to the two of you.
All right, thank you. So for the record, I'm Scott Giles, the president and CEO of the Vermont Student Assistance Program.
Marilyn Cargill, also from Vermont Student Assistance Corporation.
And what I thought we would do in the time that that we have in front of us is together we'd like to accomplish, I think there are three things that we want to touch on. One, provide the base outline. We had the opportunity to come in before and talk in some detail about our programs. We did touch on our core budget request. We'd like to, kind of refer back to that just to remind you what is contained, within that. Provide an update regarding what the House Appropriations Committee did with the support of House Education and House Commerce. And then in addition, I think as you know, Senator George, I know you had some questions about some of our programs. The Commerce Committees and the Economic Development Committees have both been working on some workforce development related proposals, some of which we will be responsible for administering if in fact they are funded. And we are kind of prepared to share some information.
And if this is helpful to the two of you, please know that we reviewed the workforce development information. We gave it our thumbs up. We brought it to economic development, and they brought it to appropriations. And one question that came up during that time was related to the loan repayment program. And that I think was what Senator Hewitt and others in the weeks were asked about. We were modeling it off of the nursing program. So that was that question. And basically, how's that nursing program going? And if this is a good model or if this is kind of rethink things.
Great. Thank you. So with that, with his introduction, given the questions now, I wanted to just turn it over to you to talk about our core budget request.
Okay.
I should also acknowledge that Claire Buckley is here, who is your advocate in the building
In wise counsel.
and wise counsel. Wise counsel.
So our core budget request, my session is on page 12, so I see that's true for yours.
We don't have page numbers. Are there?
So it looks exactly like that.
Oh, there it is. Oh, it starts at, oh, yeah, there it is. They're for young people. Good eyes. Okay, so far you're off to a bad start with the page numbers. Okay.
Oh, don't get me off on the wrong.
No, Marilyn, you're great. You're great. You know us well.
All right. So the first part of the VSAC budget request is the funding for the Vermont State Grant Programs. That's your full-time, part-time, and advancement grant that we are asking for level funding for that, which is $20,978,588. The governor did recommend that, and the House also recommended that, although they are adding some things to that base, which I'll call out in just a moment. VSAC is asking for $1 million to continue the Vermont Trades program. That is a forgivable loan program that was included in the governor's request, and the House recommended it to be part of our base, and they added it to the number above. 802 Opportunity. This is the program that allows Vermont residents making less than $75,000 a year to attend CCV tuition free with a combination of their state grant, their federal Pell Grant, and 802 Opportunity. We asked for $3.4 million to be added to base. The governor recommended one-time funding, and the House recommended that it be added to base, so that it's the combination of trades and 802 Opportunity that brings the House base figure up above the number that you see the governor and DSAC requesting. We also requested $300,000 for the aspiration program. The aspiration program is when we're going into high schools that have a significant difference between first generation and second generation college and education going rates after high school. And we come in with, the schools are partners in this program, and we are looking to make structural changes within the school. So this isn't actually working with students, this is working with administrators and teachers, so that when we step out of the aspirations program, that work continues and that they continue to be able to see an increase in students having firm plans in order to continue education beyond high school. The governor did not fund that program, and the House did not fund that program. And then the final ask that DSAC has is for the dual enrollment stipend. Just to be clear, this is not the voucher. The voucher runs through the Agency of Education. The stipend is the money that we use to help low-income students, those that are eligible for free and reduced hot lunch, receive an amount of money that they can use for books for dual enrollment courses, fees, and transportation. And this program is has been around for, we're in our 6th year now, but the legislature started that because they realized that what was happening with dual enrollment vouchers was that they were being used disproportionately by middle and upper middle income families that could afford those expenses, and low income families, children were not taking advantage of dual enrollment because those additional fees and expenses were keeping them out of the program. So that is our actual ask for the budget. And I certainly can spend a few minutes answering the questions that you raised originally, if that's helpful.
Why don't you do that, and we'll open up for questions.
You want me to start with the questions you posed?
Perfect.
So the nursing program has actually been around for 20 years, so we've got a lot of experience with this particular program. It is a forgivable loan, meaning that students sign a promissory note when they receive the funding. The funding initially acts just like a scholarship. It goes directly to the school, it pays their bill, and then the student is signing a promissory note that says that they will either work in Vermont in the field of nursing, or that it will convert to a loan, and DSAC will put it on our servicing system and we'll collect it just like any of the other loans that we administer. So far, the program was probably almost identical for the first 18 years, and then 2 or 3 years ago, the legislature really increased the money in this program. So it went from $50,000 a year to over $1 million a year. What we are seeing this year, we have given out about $2.4 million. So these are brand new awards that went out in the 22-23 school year. Last year, we had, I believe, 146 students that received this funding. They attend all of the Vermont schools that offer nursing as a major. That includes Castleton, Norwich, UVM, and VTC. This program can also be used by students who attend schools out of state, as long as, again, they sign the promissory note saying they return to Vermont to work. There are 29 of those students that are at out-of-state institutions, and that is in large part, I'm sure you have heard already, but that's in large part because there aren't enough seats for nurses within the state of Vermont and the programs that we have. So the outcomes that
So
we've
I'm sorry to
seen,
interrupt, no, just to confirm, so Castleton full in terms of the nursing program.
so that is what I understand from
Yeah,
hearing.
I know you're not speaking, yes.
Right, I don't want to
Yeah.
speak for any individual school, but that's my understanding is that they have a certain number of seats and then they have a certain number of places where these students can do their clinical work.
Sure.
And the bottlenecks in each of those different points limits how many students we can have go through in-state nursing programs. So when that testimony was received from the schools, the legislature made the decision to let it be opened up to out-of-state students with nursing programs. I'm sorry, out-of-state schools with nursing programs. So at this point, when we look at all of our experience with students who have gone into repayment, I just want to be, I don't want to in any way confuse you, but remembering that if we've got a nursing student in their junior year, their sophomore year getting this money, they won't be working for 2 or 3 years. So of the students we currently have working, 85% of them are working in a nursing position in Vermont. They're doing exactly what this program was intended for. The other 15% either are paid in full already, or they are in the process of repaying the loans back to VSAC. And then the funds that we receive in loan repayment cycle back into the program for the following year.
Sounds very successful.
And we're really pleased with the success of this program for sure.
So roughly year to year, how much rolls forward, unused rolls forward next year?
So of the original scholarship, I think this year out of 2.4 million, when the year is over, my guess is we'll have 100 to 200,000 that will roll forward.
So it's not much.
It's not much. And the only reason that's even occurring is once we award these students these dollars, schools may or may not verify enrollment as quickly as we'd like them to. And it may be a point in time that they're either doing cleanup on their enrollment or they are getting around to letting VSAC know that these students aren't there. And at that point, it doesn't make sense to try to award it to someone else because they're already in school. We're not going to get someone into school for that. So there's just a point where we just roll it forward.
Any analysis on the population in the future of, given the need of the hospital system versus how many seats are available versus interest? I mean, is there anything to indicate, that this program is having such an effect that it's kind of working itself out of necessity?
I don't think it is so far, and I would again just remind you, this program's at this $1.5 million level, and one year we got 1.5 million twice. Is that some of these students are still in school. This has only been in the last 2 or 3 years, so many of these students aren't even in the workforce yet. So the very first year you did it, there probably were some juniors and seniors that received that funds that are now in the workforce. But these pipelines are going to take some time before students actually hit the workforce. So I don't think there's enough of them that they're making any kind of a dent that you would say, do we still need the program? I don't think that's the case, but I think there's people in the medical fields that would be much better situated to answer your question about how many more of these students do we need and when will we
It's kind of a question of,
capacity.
are we actually providing enough? When you say that there's roll forward, there's funds rolling forward into future years, but that's minor money.
Right.
That might be kind of administrative due to lagging.
Yeah, I think if I can offer, I think one information is we really need to, the scale of the problem is significantly greater than the resource that we are provided through this program. This is not the only program that exists that is designed to try and ameliorate some of this. And it may be a good point, just as an example, that the nurse faculty program is another example of an approach that we are involved in participating in, as Marilyn indicated. The shortage of nurses, I've heard I don't want to quote a number now, but it's, over 10,000 is, a number that has been thrown out there before. Marilyn described choke points. So two that exist is the programs trying to expand their seats, because that's the other capacity issue that
The academic
we have, the
programs.
academic programs. One challenge is really nurse faculty, and then for a whole variety of reasons, you need more nurse faculty if you're going to expand your seats. You also need more essentially clinical supervisors, or the other kind of group that create a bottleneck to kind of expanding their capacity. And we have to kind of work all three of these at the same time. And we do have a small program that was created last year or 2 years ago.
It was created last year and it will be actually come up this year because the funding needed to be adjusted in the budget adjustment act.
For nurse faculty is part of an effort to create similar to what we're looking at with teachers and with nurses, to create a new pipeline for nurse faculty.
Just curious, so I'm not sure if you do this kind of research, but given the number of seats for nursing, nursing training within Vermont itself, do you have any kind of like factor on how many didn't partake in your system in this very generous offer, and the reasons why? Is that something that you guys research ever?
I don't believe we do. So I will say this, we had students on hold this year, because as I said, all the dollars were originally awarded. So we had students that we weren't able to fund because we had run out of funding in this particular program. And that the funding for next year looks like, if it passes, has been increased to $3 million. So that's looking towards that capacity issue.
Is it first come, first serve?
It is first come, first serve.
And there's no like federal poverty level associated with it, or can anybody apply? Provided
Anyone can apply. There was a need basis to this at one point, and I believe the legislature, again, looking at the size of the workforce problem they were trying to solve, took the need basis out to say, if they're willing to work in Vermont for those years of receiving the funds, that's what we need as nurses. So there's no workforce, there's no need basis. We also, this program is, if you're an out-of-state student and you would like to use these funds, you may do that as well. But again, you have to commit to working in Vermont.
You're going to know if there's requirements around the number of nurses that can be trained at a time in a class, those kinds of things. We can ask Cassie. I'm just, it would be interesting to,
Yeah,
because, I can see where lab equipment is limited, or nurses need, in order for the institution to be licensed or accredited, they can only have 10 nurses in a classroom at a time, something like that.
Yeah, my understanding, this is obviously a major focus of both the state university, the University of Vermont, Norwich, and, the other programs that are delivering, kind of education and training programs for nurses. So they'd be better to tell you the details of what barriers there are.
Is it just for education? Is it solely focused on the RNs, or is it the various levels of nursing and PAs? And I mean, there's a significant problem overall.
Right. So as you know, as you're saying, that nursing is a series of steps, or can be. So you can use this for the LPN, you can use it for the 2-year RN, the 4-year RN, and you can use it for the PAs. What it doesn't do, because they covered this with our advancement grant, is LMAs. So that very, very first step is covered with an advancement grant. And in fact, the legislature put these in order of priority, and LPN is the highest priority that the legislature set for this particular program.
But if it's first come, first serve.
Exactly.
Are we talking about the school program yet, or are
You
you?
jump in wherever you want.
Okay, great. I had asked about speech and language pathologists, if they are included, and I think the answer is no, correct?
So I don't think so, and I know that you had asked a question and that I responded to that. I don't even know when I responded to it, but I know I responded to you. And so the psychologist and the psychiatrist and the social workers will be able to go through the mental health funding that we are standing up this summer. And then the nurses, again, as I said, would probably be better served to go through the nursing program, the teacher education. I don't believe there is a path right now for the speech language pathologist.
Is that something we should think about, or how would that work?
So if the legislature would like to create that program for that particular group, or figure out where they would fit in best, from CSAC's perspective, we would just revise whatever program that you tell us to put that in.
Okay.
But again, as I said, right now, I don't think they fit into anything the way it's currently written.
But if we had, like right now, if you had flexibility with the nurse program, to Senator Gulick's point, where if all this, if there had been flexibility, if $200,000 is left over, and you were able to give additional funds to allied health sciences, which some of Senator Gulick's talked about, OTs, speech, those kinds of folks. Would something with that kind of language work? Does that make sense?
So the answer, I think the simplest
Yeah.
kind of approach to this, because we've been, in these programs, we've tried to focus more on the administrative side, than the kind of pure policy side.
Yeah.
I think there would be two choices. One would be to create a like program that is targeted towards, these particular groups, or to expand the eligibility of one of the existing programs to explicitly include that. You disagree with that?
Not at all, not at all. I think, and I'm sorry, I'm sitting here feeling kind of ignorant because I'm not quite sure exactly what else a speech might end up doing or what the education path is for that person. So whether it's a standalone program or it makes more sense to embed it in something else. I just don't even feel like.
Yeah,
I'm
right,
advised.
yeah, and I don't feel as though I'm an expert on it either, I just know that there's a shortage of SLPs, and it seems to be a great need in schools, so. As we were looking at the teacher program, I thought that could be interesting, but yeah, I'll do a little more research.
Somewhat related is mental health professionals.
Right, and
We made an investment, as you know, through ARPA funds. A lot of schools went out and hired different, were able to hire health professionals and liaisons. All that money is, and need these people. It's on our minds, it's on local districts' minds, and this might be something we can come back to next year.
But you do have a program that'll stand up this summer that's 1.5 million for mental health professionals, but they have to be at the graduate levels. They're actually doing their counseling at the graduate level so that they can be obtaining the degrees that they need to work in those jobs. So that does exist right now. Well,
Great.
that the money has been appropriated right now, but we need to stand the program up.
That answers that.
How do you market? How do you market?
Really great question. So the schools are our biggest source of marketing because the nurses have already applied to those schools. The mental health professionals will apply to go into their graduate program. So we will use the schools, but we use front porch forums, we use radio ads, we use a lot of social media, we use our own website. So if you went to the VSAC website and typed in workforce development, a page comes up on all of the different programs that we are currently administering for the state of Vermont and who they're for and how you access the funds is explained in those pages. So that's primarily what we're using for marketing. We also have the outreach counselors that I think we've talked a little bit about with you, but we have a full staff at BSAC whose job it is to work with graduating high school students, middle school students, and then adult students across the state. And they are all very familiar with these programs. So as they're working with, there were 6,000 adults a year and some number of high school students and middle school students, they're talking about these programs that students know what is available that they can be using to help fund their education.
You know, it would be amazing if, you know, that minor money and proposing to appropriations, you know, to link. They go in to look at tourism, they pick up on the fact there's, you know, Vermont academics, they pick up on the fact there's free programs and voila. New citizens with nice skills. Changes.
So can you just review for us one more time for me, because I'm sure everybody else already has it, the disagreements between the governor and the House on this proposal, just so I have it. We only have about 5 minutes left.
So do you want to do that, Scott? So the differences occur on 802 opportunity.
Okay.
And that one, the governor is recommending 802 opportunity funding at 3.4 million, but he
Yes.
recommended one-time funding. And the House and BSAC both requested that it be added to base.
Okay.
And I think that is the only difference between the governor and the House.
Okay. Please.
Aspirations program, does it currently exist?
Yes.
Okay. Why was it not supported by the House or the governor? I'm just curious, you know?
So I think it was, kind of walk this line. In the past, when we first, as Marilyn said, a program, if I can digress just for a minute to kind of set the context. You know, we have our current education outreach programs that I think committee is familiar with, where we've got a presence working with low-income students in nearly every middle school and high school, not all. Research identified some high schools in particular where the aspiration and continuation rates for students, the gap between first and second generation was wide. And we wanted to be able to go in with our federal grants, which funds the work. There are real limitations on what this thing can do in terms of experimentation. So we created aspirations, and in the beginning years, we actually got permission to carve out a portion of our state grant money to support that. 2 years ago now, when we get the years right, pandemic funding was kind of funny. We actually got that money added onto our budget for 2 years. I don't think any policy, there's no lack of support for the program itself. I think the question really is what the funding mechanism is, whether it's money that is added onto our budget as we requested, or whether in the end of the day, we're given authority to draw from our base appropriation in order to continue that work, is I think where the disagreement ultimately resides. We'd obviously like to have it added back, into the base as it is. It's an impactful program for the schools that we're working with. And it's one of our best ways of trying to leverage the knowledge and expertise that we've developed in our one-on-one counseling programs and really share that with schools and let them design a program that is built around the needs of their community, and their community in the school and their community outside the school. So going back to the generous offer that the chair made at the outset, we would be very appreciative of a recommendation from the community to continue funding that program.
Thank you.
It's actually the same question.
Earlier on, when you came in, you talked about students who needed book money, I don't know if it was this year or in the past, and that those funds go fast. The kid who might need those tire blows, those kinds of dollars. That was really powerful testimony. Where is that? Is that
The micro grant is
Right.
taken right out of the 20,978,000. We are
Okay.
setting aside
okay?
money from that for those emergency grants, as you call them.
powerful. So glad that
Yeah, it's a great program and
kids know it's there. And I know it's not just kids, I mean, it can be.
These are adult students.
Right.
Yeah, the power of this program as we worked with the schools was that, you know, sometimes a $200 expense will be the thing that causes somebody to drop out. And even if they don't think they're going to drop out, missing class for a week.
Yeah.
You know, I think we all know what impact that can have.
Curiosity question, just clarification. So these are all grants, none of these are loans. And then the 25.4.
are you looking at this page?
Yes, that's correct. And all need-based.
Anything else? I mean, this is what we really needed.
Right, well, as, you know, as I think,
Well, conversation this afternoon.
you know, as we said at our opening, you know, we would be, we're grateful for the support that you all have provided us historically. You've been great partners, you know, working kind of through kind of a pretty broad variety of challenges that we faced supporting students during the pandemic. I'll make my last pitch for you to this is a program that has created, I think, a very, very powerful access point. We've demonstrated its power. It's a priority both for us and for CCV. And, you know, there's an opportunity for us to make this really a permanent part of, you know, kind of the Vermont education landscape and a permanent source of opportunity for, you know, low and lower middle income, you know, kind of Vermont students and their families. So, thank you.
Thank you both. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to, we'll talk about this this afternoon, but we have 483 up on the agenda for the next couple of hours. Let's say we have Dr. Boucher and Chris Kane. This is, we asked the agency to weigh in on an act relating to accountability and oversight of independent schools that are eligible to receive public tuition. I believe they are zooming in. Yes. We put it on that short just in case you forgot. We were going to see who gets it at the end of session. Yes.
Afternoon cocktail.
They're not there yet. Oh, they are. Oh, they, Dr. Boucher?
Hi, can folks hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Hi, good afternoon, Chair. Hello, committee. I am so sorry that I'm not able to effectively Zoom in or be there in person. I'm actually in my car on my phone. So I apologize for that. I'm handling multiple ways to actually get my volume. So I'm glad you can hear me. Is that still working?
And is Chris Kane with you?
He's not with me. He should be zooming in.
I'm
There
also
he is.
here. Yep. On the call.
Thank you. So we have you, we've asked the agency to weigh in on H 483. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Heather Boucher, Interim Secretary for Education. So yes, we are here, happy to provide some testimony on H 483 as requested. We do not fully support this bill, and there's a couple of reasons why. First, the State Board of Ed recently completed a lengthy rulemaking process, as the committee likely knows, to improve the oversight and regulation of independent schools. And that's, of course, the 2200 rule series. As it stands, as a result of that rulemaking, to be eligible to receive public tuition, independent schools will be required to meet several new criteria regarding the delivery of special education services. And I suspect that's why well, I know that's why Chris is here to answer any questions folks might have about what that delivery of special education services will look like under the new rules. These rules take full effect on this July 1st. We believe they should be implemented before any additional changes are made to the oversight of independent schools. We note that these rules were co-crafted over many months. They involved multiple stakeholder feedback sessions and opportunities for public comment across, all partners, public entities, private entities, independent schools, state leaders, all of a state board, of course, engagement. So our view is that we really need to wait for that process to be implemented. We spent a lot of time working on that, and it makes best sense, given what's already in those rules, to let that get started and then perhaps take stock of how things are going. We also note that as a result of these rules, the independent schools are already required to publish, maintain, and follow a non-discriminatory enrollment policy if they wish to be approved eligible for public tuition. So it's unclear to us why we need additional information on that particular piece. So on enrollment. Our position is that the recent court rulings around the religious status of independent schools do not justify significant change at this point in the oversight of independent schools. However, we would support strengthening oversight of anti-discrimination provisions that would ensure that independent schools who choose to accept public tuition meet the non-discrimination requirements under Vermont's public accommodation laws. So we actually, in our written testimony, have recommended an amendment specifically to the definition of place of public accommodation, and would recommend that. So that is all my formal testimony, Mr. Chair. Happy to take any questions.
When we start with this, yeah, please.
Just a comment. Thank you, Secretary Boucher, for your testimony. I think more so just a comment on point number 2. At least the way that I see it, this is not in response to recent court rulings, rather regarding religious status. Rather, we're trying to create an anti-discriminatory provision or provisions that are applicable to all independent schools, regardless of religious affiliation. So just a thought that I wanted to put out there.
Thank you.
Anyone else on either number 1 or number 2 before we go to Mr. Kane? Okay, Mr. Kane.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a specific testimony to add to what Secretary Boucher said. She represented sort of the points from special education pretty clearly. I wanted to make myself available for any questions about the provision of special education in independent schools, to clarify any questions that the committee might have.
So I think one question. So Act 173, we know is going to be going into effect July 1, 2023. And I guess the agency's role in that would be helpful to know. So again, this is going to say that if you're going to take public dollars and go to an independent school, you're going to follow the special education laws put forward by the state and federal government.
Yeah, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? You are interested in the agency's support?
The agency's role in that rollout of Act 173. What sorts of things you need to do, what sorts of things, is there any preparation that the agency has to get ready for on this? Is there some way that you're thinking about oversight? What if a parent were to come in a year and say, hey, my school still isn't offering special education services? Act 173 went into effect in July 1, 2023. Now we're in July 1, 2024. Just maybe say something about how the agency is gearing up for this. What is a multiple year rollout? maybe nothing.
So I guess I would want to sort of differentiate a couple of pieces here. So Act 173 is, is a law that contains a series of provisions that are not directly special education. So the agency has produced a number of materials, and Heather may be able to speak more specifically to some of the broader agency initiatives around Act 173 specifically. But because of the implementation of Act 173, it required opening the special education rules, which has resulted in a number of other specific items. So I could certainly speak to the sort of the past and current work of the agency related to the changes in the special education rules, or the changes to the independent school rules that Heather mentioned prior. But so there's, I guess, a number of pieces here that we could go further on depending on, I guess, what specific information you're kind of looking for. Heather, do you want to address Act 173 specifically?
No, I actually think I have the response that Mr. Chair's the chair is looking for. So we just yesterday presented a timeline of supports and activities that we'll be providing to the independent schools, both in terms of gauging some initial interest, not binding, in about a week, actually, around which independent schools at this point, and with some additional guidance materials that we're working on right now that we'll provide to them along with this informal survey, which of them are thinking, yeah, we think we're going to go for this, which of them are thinking no. And so if there are some that, take a look at these requirements and then say, there's no way we're going to be interested in or be able to meet these, that is the point at which, we would recommend to them and to the LEAs that are affiliated with them or that, they contract with, that they would then reach out to parents and say, this is going to be changing. So then we will move into a series of assurances so part of the issue is that we have some schools right now that are currently approved, and we'll be getting assurances from them, which is a very typical way we actually check on things for that specific set of schools, which is kind of small right now, but is an issue. So we're not going to make them go through the approval process again. In other words, they've just gotten approved. So we're going to actually request that they actually give us assurances that they're actually meeting these new rules, and then they'll come up again, provided that, and we will dig into those a little bit, those assurances, and provided everything is fine, they'll come back up again for approval during their next cycle. So this is really about for new approvals. And again, this is for starting this coming year, for new academic year, for new approvals for the following academic year. That's when this will really be kicking in. I hope that answers your questions, Mr. Chair, or gets closer to the answer to them.
I think so. Anybody else have questions about the agency's position on that 173? I mean, on page 43. Okay, I don't see any other additional questions. So we appreciate you being with us. We might just have you stay on the line for 10 minutes or so. We're going to shift to a different topic, and if something else comes up, it would be good to have both of you there.
Sure, not a problem. Happy to do so.
Thanks.
Joining us, I want to talk about S117.
Oh, sure.
Thanks. We're not on the agenda, but since there's been a flurry of text back and forth, I just want to bring everyone up to speed. S117 we talked about yesterday with Sue Minter. You were kind enough to jump into the fray, if you will, and help figure some of this stuff out. Just tell us, and I received some text from Sue Minter, and just wondering if you could kind of give the committee an update.
So,
And again, this is a reminder to everyone, This is related to the funding of parent education programs and basically going from 83% to 100%.
Sure. Jeff Francis for the Vermont Superintendent's Association. As you know, I was a participant from the sideline of the conversation yesterday.
We appreciate it.
I came in based on my experience and recollection working on this issue in 2007 and 2008. And wanted to take the opportunity to follow up, which I've done in conversations with Sue Minter and her staff at Capstone. I've had 2 conversations with Stephanie, who works with Sue. I had a conversation this afternoon with Sue and Stephanie. And in the interim, I spoke with 3 superintendents and assistant superintendent to get their perspective on the topic. And the superintendents with whom I spoke were Julie Regenball, who's up in Missisquoi Valley School District. I spoke with Laura Boudreau and Jim Colkeen from Southern Vermont Supervisory Union. And I spoke with Chris Hennessy, who is the superintendent in Barry, who is a participant in the Brookside School, which is the teen parent center that you heard from that's associated with Capstone. And the goal was to try to be in a position to recommend what the best approach is to getting to the crux issue that led to the introduction of S117, which was concerns about funding for the teen parent centers, but also the relationship between the school districts and the teen parent centers, because the proposal in S117 at its core would change the current funding for these teen parent centers from 83% of the former year statewide average expense per student to 100%. And if you recall the conversation yesterday, I interjected and said that the basis for the 83% determination back in 2008 was that school districts were providing services to the children or the students even when they were at the teen parent center. So that's the context. In the meeting that I had with the superintendents, I found that the relationships between the school districts and the teen parent centers are not always consistent. And the best way to describe that is in the Mount Anthony Union High School situation, the center that they work with, which I believe is Sunrise, is 2 blocks away from the school. And there's a fair amount of connectivity between the students and the center itself.
Yeah.
So when I talked to Laura Boudreau, who had most knowledge of the program, she said that, and I'll add here parenthetically, that both the school systems that were affected, or that were working with the 2 teen parent centers that I'm going to talk about right now, high praise, great working relationship, appreciated the work that they were doing, not only with the centers, but also for the kids. But there was, as I suspected, differentiation between how the schools remained in the lives of the students, right? So in some instances, for example, it might only be a situation where a student who had to re-enroll because they dropped out would have contact with the registrar's office and then basically be subsumed into the teen parent center. In other instances, if a student was in high school, for example, there would still be a strong connection between the high school itself, the student, and the teen parent center. So the notion that school districts would pay 100% rather than 83% on the basis of a perception that it was some sort of a standard arrangement is flawed thinking. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean there's not a consistency in the programs. So the conclusion that we reach in the 3 series of conversations that I had with these folks, and let me pause here to say, I sort of found myself in the center of this. I didn't ask to be there. But since I had a little bit of knowledge and was agreeing to connect the parties, I was willing to do that. The conclusion that we reached was that we should take the conversation for the time being outside the building, have, starting with myself and Sue Minter, build a framework for an analysis of the policy and the discussion, and come back to the General Assembly in the second half of the biennium with a greater understanding of the issues and with some recommendations about how to support the relationships between the school, the center, and the student, and also pay attention to the challenge that brought us to this place in the first place, which was concerns on the part of, in particular, Brookside, that they needed more funding support. So when we had the conversation, I said to them, and again, I felt I was put in a position where I needed to at least start to conceptualize some suggestions. What I said to Sue and Stephanie and to the superintendents was, we could suggest that S-117 be considered in its current form by the committee, which I think would not have done justice to the complexity of the issue. We could ask for the opportunity to work on this over the ensuing months, pointed toward the second half of the biennium. Or we could make other funding suggestions that I don't think would do justice to the nature of the relationships. So in the conversation that I had just this afternoon with Sue and Stephanie and myself, we agreed that we had suggested to the committee that we do more work and come back with a proposal next year.
Really appreciate it. Objections?
Sounds great, and that means we don't have to do a study, right? We don't have to ask for a study or anything. Okay, super.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a fairly straightforward issue, but it's straightforward in the solution. Getting to the solution is going to have to sort of result in a better understanding of what the interplay is. But you should rest assured that at the center of the conversations will be the best interest of the student. We want to make sure that the schools are treated fairly, but we also understand that these important programs need financial support.
Yeah. Very much appreciate it. So, and I mentioned this to the lead sponsor of the Bill Center personally. He's good with it as well. So we'll look forward to continuing the conversation.
Okay. So thank you very much. If
Yeah.
you can get Mr. Ellis to relinquish my seat, I'll leave this seat.
Absolutely not.
Thank you. I can stand for a while.
Oh, thank you. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Before we do, I want to recognize, if I may, Jim Demaray, former Ledge Council, who worked for the Education Committee for how many?
7 years.
7 years. An incredible mind, an incredible asset. Are you back to work or are you back to visit?
After the day, say hi.
Okay, all right.
I'm not doing any work.
And you left us in great hands with
Thank you.
St. James. Last year we had 2 attorneys in this committee, which was great. So, well, glad you're here. Thank you. All right, committee, we have State Board coming in 10 minutes. So, thank you. Great.
Enough problems last year, they needed 2 lawyers.
2 lawyers.